All right, so for our third question, this is one of the select all the correct answer questions. This reads, select all of the options below which are true of a second order reaction. Okay, so a second order reaction is one in which, if you were trying to look at it in terms of a graphical representation, a second order reaction is one where you're going to be looking at the graph of 1 over your concentration of your reactant versus time. And this graph is going to give you a positive slope in a straight line of that graph. So whenever you're looking at the concentration, 1 over the concentration versus time, that's the graph that you're going to see. Now, if we look at our first two answer options, rate is equal to K, a rate constant, times A squared. Okay, so this squared, this second there, that should be a really good signal that you're talking about a second order reaction. And now if we compare our first two options, well, that 2 exponent is what you're looking for a second order reaction, because what you're talking about in a second order reaction is the concentration of your reactant matters, and it can significantly change your rate. Now, this first one is a first order reaction, and this rate equals K times concentration is an example of first order, whereas rate equals K times A squared is a second order reaction. Okay, now the second two, or the second grouping, a graph of 1 over concentration of your reactant A versus time will produce a negative slope versus 1 over the concentration of A versus time will produce a positive slope. I kind of use that as my starting point. And so this right here, this graph that I've shown below is a positive slope. So I'm going to mark that right there. Okay, now if you look at these two answer options, they're kind of paired up with one another. Just as the first two were paired up with one another, it was this or this. Now our third answer option, or a third pair of answer options, the units of the rate constant are m times s to the negative first power, which is the same as molarity per second. The units of the rate constant are inverse seconds, okay, which is the same as 1 over s. Now, it's really probably tempting to say, okay, well, between the first two answer options, one of them was right. Between the next two answer options, one of them was right. But don't fall into that trap, because just because there were two answer options that were similar to one another and one of them was right, well, these are actually, neither of these are correct. The rate constant for a 0 order reaction has units that are molarity per second. So this is a 0th order rate constant, whereas inverse seconds, that is your rate constant for a first order reaction. So our correct answer here is, well, this one and this one. The next two were tempting, but neither one of those is actually correct. The correct units for a rate constant for a second order reaction are m to the negative 1, seconds to the negative 1, which is the same as 1 over molarity seconds. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you in the next question.